Now, in regards to any type of issue with the condominium corporations, first you need to understand what is the legislation. What do the regulations say? And this was one of the hindrances which we had in regards to condo borrowing previously. Who here can tell me the section that previously dealt with condo borrowing? This is prior to the changes that are coming. What was the section that dealt with condo borrowing? The board could do it. Your thoughts? Where was it dealt with in the Act? It's a trick question. One person guesses that it wasn't in the Act. Anybody going to give me a hand up that it was in the Act? You're both actually right. How is that possible? The only place that condo borrowing was addressed was in the statutory bylaws, which is part of the Act. But the Act made no reference to it. So if you were one of those few corporations that is governed by the statutory bylaws, it just literally stated the corporation can borrow. Now, most bylaws, even going back to the 60s, would have provisions dealing with borrowing, but the Act was silent. So what would that do to a lender? A lender is dealing with a whole ream. So the people that lent for someone to buy a unit, they're facing all of this regulation and laws and case law. And then it comes to condos. And the Act says absolutely nothing about it. And I think this was one of the hindrances that prevented a lot of participation from lenders in this area. However, there are changes. First off, we're seeing a lot more participation, as I already mentioned. And because of this, the Act and the regulations are being amended accordingly. So effective January 1st, 2020, Section 37 sub 4 sub 5 is now added. Now, Section 37 of the Condominium Property Act is that section that deals with the corporation's obligation to repair and maintain the, listed off for me, the common property. What other kind of properties? Common property? Managed property, very good. Two more. Real property. What is real property? Land. And the final one? Personal property. Very good. So Section 37 deals with the statutory obligations of the condominium corporation to take care of things, and now it provides that a corporation may, subject to the regulations, borrow money for the purpose of carrying out the powers and duties of the corporation under this section. It says money borrowed by the corporation under subsection 4 must only be used for the purposes for which it's borrowed. Okay? Any of us lawyers that have ever done any, well, at least how I do it when I do a financing, I always tell clients, this is for the purpose of fixing the home or for buying a home. It's not to run to the Caymans. Okay? And same type of thing applies for this section. If you're on the board, you got access to a couple $1,000,000, it's for the purpose of what it's borrowed. There's no percentages you're entitled to do other fun things with. Okay? Now, regulations, effective January 1st, 2020. It's dealt with in Part 2.3 of the regulations. Section 31.7 sub 2 requires borrowing to be approved by ordinary resolution if we're over a 15% threshold. 15% of your annual revenues per your last financial statements. If you're over that, you need to have approval by the owners. Okay? What happens if the bylaws state that you need to have approval of the owners if in fact it's over, say, $50,000 and that's only 10%. Okay, so the Act says you need an ordinary resolution to approve in the event that it's over 15%. The bylaws say anything over $50,000, which is only 10%. Okay, so do you need to get approval? And let's say the loan was going to be between the 10 and 15%. Do you need to get approval of the owners, yes or no? Yes? Yes? Do I have any no's? Got one no in the back? The other no's? Two no's? Three no's? 4, 5? Great. Which one is it? So on one hand, the Act states you need approval if you're over this threshold. And then the bylaws state you need approval if you're over this threshold. Okay? What happens if there's a conflict? Act prevails. However, is it a conflict? It's not a conflict. What you have is the bylaws requiring a more onerous standard. That's not a conflict in this situation. There might be instances where it could be, but in this situation, the bylaw states, no, none of this 15% jazz. And it can be $5,000. If the bylaws have a higher requirement, you follow what that higher requirement is, because that operates as a contract. And I would say it's not in conflict. Okay? But the minimum standard here, and what if the bylaws don't say anything about borrowing? Can you borrow? Yes, because it's now enshrined in the legislation. So you have to get the owner's approval. This is not a board thing. This is an owner's thing. Per the Act, and frankly any other set of bylaws I've seen. Okay? Which level do you use? Well, it makes it very clear that it's an ordinary resolution, but if the bylaws require a special resolution, which there are a few out there that do it, and they're really annoying, then you've got to get the special. Okay? Now, the approving resolution, this is the resolution of the owners. It must specify the amount to be borrowed, either as a maximum amount or a percentage of revenues. I've only ever seen a maximum amount, or the actual amount. I've never seen a percentage of revenues, which would really be a pain in the neck. Corporations. This is also dealt with in regulations, may provide a statement to lenders affirming its ability to borrow a maximum amount. So basically what that means is the corporations will now, to their lenders, state, we are approved to borrow this amount. We always did that before. Now it's just set out in the regulations. Now, these aren't the only changes that we see in the legislation, the regulations, in regards to borrowing. Section 44 of the Act. What did Section 44 of the Act do for the keeners in the room? Condo documents. You knew there were some keeners in the room. So Section 44 encapsulated the list by which owners could say, I want that. And it wasn't just owners. It was owners, it was mortgagees, and prospective purchasers. Okay? The list is no longer in Section 44. Section 44 is now going to say that people are entitled to documents, go see the regulations. And then you kick over to, I think it's 20.52, and it has the enumerated list now. One of the things in the list, so this is a change, for those who are property managers or in self-managed boards, effective January 1st, 2020, if you have a loan in place, you now have to be ready as part of the document provisions to provide a loan disclosure statement, including a document which shows the starting balance, current balance, interest rate, monthly payment, purpose of the loan, amortization period, and default information if applicable. Now this is information that when you talk about Section 44, how important is it to get that information right? Sort of important, not important, or extremely important? Very good. Extremely important. What happens if you don't get it right? Bloody lawyers. Okay? That's what happens. We're talking about things that can give rise to lawsuits. If you provide information, if people are looking at this information as part and parcel of a purchase, and you don't disclose information, this can give rise to potential actions. So, anyone who has a loan, January 1st, 2020, be ready for that. Property managers in the room, you got to be ready for this. Okay? And this may require getting information and updates as is necessary from your lender so as to ensure that the information is accurate and correct. And anyone who's considering for their corporation a loan, this is one of the reporting requirements that I'll be talking about later on. Now, the statutory bylaws, for those, anyone here have any corporations that are dealt with deal with statutory bylaws? Yeah. Two? Few? Good. So, there's changes in the statutory bylaws. The question was, if you have to request information from the bank, the lender, and they're going to charge you, can you charge that back? That's something I would look carefully at. Right now, if you ask my gut reaction, what I know is going to be in the Act, no. Because this information is prescribed information, and the cost of it is set out in the regulations. But I haven't looked at that specific issue carefully with the new one, so with that little caveat on the end. Now, the statutory bylaws, they're also tweaked. And this might be easier. Any questions, just write them down. We're going to have a Q&A at the end. The statutory bylaws are changed. So before, it just simply stated that the corporation can borrow. That's it. Doesn't talk about approval, whether it's required or not. They beefed it up. And so it's found in section 4 sub B of the statutory bylaws, which are now found in Schedule 4. It's no longer Appendix 2 of the Act, effective January 1st, 2020. So for those of you who have statutory bylaws, those cease to be your bylaws, January 1st, 2020. You now need to go find Schedule 4 of the regulations. Those are the new bylaws. Okay? So the corporation may, subject to 31.7 of the regulations, borrow money required by the corporation and may secure repayment. So what this does is just sets out, yes, those corporations that have statutory bylaws, absolutely they can borrow too. It doesn't talk about approval. That's dealt with in the regulations.